comics history. Anyway, moving on to Jesse Lee Herndon. Hi, Dave. Hope you're doing well. I have 3 questions for you this month. As the unofficial transcriber F, and thank you again for that, Jesse. Please hold for Dave Sam. I must ask, what do you recall about the transcriber of Cerebus's commentaries in latter days? He is only referred to as the, both in the text and on the covers. There's never any visual depiction, just like there had not been for the prior legion of substitute wise fellows who did the same job. And I presume that that was that was so as for there to be just one less character to have to draw. Partly that, and partly the fact that the amanuensis, particularly in with regards to the Torah and the Gospels, David's Psalms, Revelation, that person is never credited, and yet, and there's a lot of questions that raises of how much was this written by this person, and how much of this was just transcribed by this person. Particularly with John's Gospel and Revelation, which are definitely have the appearance of having been written, either written small w or written in quotation marks by the same amanuensis, which seems kind of unlikely because there's such a gap in time between when Revelation was first committed to parchment and when John's Gospel was obviously first committed to parchment. John's Gospel would have been definitely before the sacking of the temple by Rome in 70 A.D. and Revelation wasn't sent down and transcribed until 98 A.D. John, the author of, in quotation marks, of both of those books, was very, very, very old at the time that Revelation was revealed to him, which raises the question, was he actually the writer of it? Or was there an amanuensis, and was it somebody who was familiar enough with the person who wrote the very, very idiosyncratic Greek of John's Gospel and Revelation, and the 2 letters attributed to John? I think there's 2 letters attributed to John, and they're really just letter fragments, but you go, boy, there it is. There's that voice again. There's that means of expressing that is just completely unique to this. And of course, if you're a devout monotheist like I am, you go, well, it's the voice of God. This is Johannes Jesus was the Lamb of God, and as far as I can determine, John, the apostle, was the Lamb of the Lamb, which I'll be getting into in my Monday reports as we go along. But definitely, you almost never even got the name of the person recording the biblical text. The only exception to that I can think of off the top of my head, and it's just off the top of my head, would be the scribe who transcribed the book of Isaiah, which is the the longest book in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, at 66 chapters. So it was a matter of, okay, well, if I'm going to do Cerebus, fulfilling his destiny by reading the Torah and describing what he's reading, whoever is going to be doing it, they're not going to be an actual character in the book. They're going to be as close as possible to the anonymity associated with the transcription of biblical text. That it was just something that you didn't do as the person who was just putting this into consumable shape. I mean, a prophet of God or a prophet of the YHWH is on a completely exalted level above someone who's just going, there's a better verb for that. This would be a good spot to switch verb tense. I would change this from a separate sentence to a subordinate clause. It would be, the difference between whoever designed St. Peter's, Michelangelo, and whoever executed St. Peter's, and whoever was doing the plumbing. I mean, there's plumbing, and then there's St. Peter's, and those are two different things. Let me see. Since the Waverly Press remastered edition of it is coming soon in quotation marks, what's the story of your personal copy of Cerebus number 2? I remember seeing it in an episode or two of CerebusTV and noticed how bad the condition is. It seems very, quote, lived in, unquote. How did it end up in such a state when your copies of surrounding issues that I've seen in those videos didn't look nearly as worn? That was a situation where I'm pretty sure Waverly Press was still doing the covers of Cerebus, and Fairway Press was printing the interiors. And I'm pretty sure I got a call from Jeff Moyer saying, "Are you sure you want the cover to look like this? Like I've run out a bunch of them, and I'm using your overlays, like I did all of the color in toned and solid overlays on acetate over top of the reduced PMT of the cover. I really don't think that you want it to look this way." And it's like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll come over and take a look at it. So he had as far as I recall, the interior of number 2 had been delivered by Fairway Press. He was printing the covers, so he took one of the guts of number 2, chopped it down on his cutting board to the right size, took one of his printed covers and chopped it down to the right size. So we weren't going to have the discussion about the size of this comic book, which was the big dust up on number 1. I'm pretty sure this is what you want, is comic book size. But what about the cover? And when I looked at the cover, it was because I was doing the yellowish, more reddish yellow background color, almost orange, a graduated orange, and it was going over top of black. It's like, well, okay, then I'll just extend it over into the black so I don't have any gaps in the color on the logo, and the black will just cover it up. What I didn't realize was when you do a basically solid yellow on top of black, you get this really, really sickly green. So I had this sickly green halo around everything. And it's like, yeah, I don't want it to look like that. Why does it look like that? And it's like Jeff explained, well, and I explained, I thought the black was just going to cover it up. And he said, no, black doesn't cover up yellow. If you're printing yellow on top of black, it's just this really, really sick green color. So I paid Jeff whatever it was that I paid him to fix that by taking that overlay and knocking out all of the yellow that wasn't going right on top of the logo. So sentimental attachment, that was always my first copy of Cerebus number 2, and that was dodging a bullet. Okay, I didn't have this catastrophic problem with the cover, which was a different catastrophic problem from the one that I had on number 1, but was still a catastrophic problem. So I always kept it as a sentimental attachment. There's only one number 2 that looks like this, and thank God for that. So I will pull it out, and it's the off-White House Library copy of number 2, which is in the stack of the 300 issues. And I'll pull it out, and I'll get Rolly to scan it and send it to you, Matt, so everybody can see. Isn't it nice that Jeff Moyer phoned about this instead of every copy of number 2 looking like this?
How much did you guys fight over the cover to number 1 is probably the answer to why he called.
Yeah, he knew that I wasn't happy, definitely, but it was, from a printer's standpoint, it's like, it's not that big a problem. Like, you're actually, if you want to look on the bright side, you're getting more comic book for the money. It's like, it's magazine size instead of comic book size, but you're still only being charged for comic book size. And it's like, well, that's not going to fly with a comic book fan. I didn't do it as a magazine size. I wanted it to be a comic book. Well, okay, you're not that big a customer. I will try and accommodate you. Here's a couple of potential solutions. You pick what one you want. The same as I've got the only copy of Cerebus number 1 trimmed to comic book size, because that was Jeff going, you could have this where the border, the margin around the pages goes practically right up to the right-hand side of the page and the left-hand side of the page on every other page. Or you can have it magazine size where it doesn't do that. And it's like, okay, lesser of two evils. I'm not happy with either of them, but I'll pick the magazine size. And it was one of those things. You recognize, okay, he's going to accommodate me a little bit, but I can see how much space Cerebus number 1 is taking up in his print shop, and I can see how much space this giant campaign he's doing for a jean manufacturer or whatever is taking up. This guy's going to get the attention. I'm not going to get this attention. It's not. It's nothing personal. It's just money talks, and your comic book isn't speaking very loudly right now. And nothing against that. We'll stick with it as long as we can. As someone whose only real Will Eisner experience is through a reprint of The Spirit number 1 and his story with you and Gerhardt in Cerebus Jam, what books of his should I start with? Obviously, A Contract with God is the big one, but what others? Well, first of all, I would suggest that if you can find low-cost copies of the Warren Publishing and Kitchen Sink Publishing Spirit magazines, that would probably tell you where your spirit allegiances would lie. different people like different parts of the spirit, and both Jim Warren and Dennis Kitchen adopted the position of we're not going to print these chronologically. We're going to print here's an early one, here's 19 wartime one, here's a post-war one, here's the Wally Wood Cerebus on the Moon stuff, and we'll try and do as much of this so each person gets something that appeals to them, and that's definitely, if you're looking at Will Eisner as the guy that wrote the textbook on comic book storytelling, comic art storytelling, sequentially, I think you kind of have to start with that, with the work that he did, Contract with God forward. I would say your best bet would be to find descriptions of each of the books that he did as a graphic novel. Alien Life Force, the Tenement, all of the different books that he did. If you read it and you go, actually that sounds interesting. I'm interested in that time period and that kind of material. I'm trying to remember what the book was that was his Romana Clay of his experiences in the 1940s, the beginning of the comic book field. If that's what you want to read, that's the one that you want to read, because it's the one that comes the closest to autobiography, kind of cleaned up, but definitely with a lot of stuff that, this is much closer to what it was like in the 1930s and 1940s, before anybody was talking about what it was actually like and not just romanticizing the whole thing. That would be my recommendation. I mean, Fag and the Jew was the last work that he did, so it's very, very interesting. It's one of those, as a Jewish person who is writing about the Merchant of Venice character, Fagin, and different interpretations of him, and what Will saw in the Fag and the Jew character, and all of the research that he put into it, of going, all right, there's this strain and there's this permutation. It's definitely a very worthwhile book, but it's also the only one of its kind. He didn't really do that many thorough research pieces. I think that would probably be close to the top of my list if I was in a situation of rereading Will's work. Contract with God, always the title story in that one. Just the fact that he came up with this whole new way of doing much longer comic book narratives, and going all the way down to base 2 panel compositions, 2 panels to a page, 1 panel page or a 2-page spread for emphasis, smaller panels to move the story along, completely stripped down. If you like The Contract with God, you will like pretty much everything that Will did after that, because they're all Will Eisner treatments. This is what he wanted to do when he was doing the Spirit, instead of doing the Spirit, was to do actual literature instead of quasi superhero material, costume character material. So that would be my recommendation: is find a list of all of the books that are either in print or available. Read the description on Amazon, or see if you can find a description for current publishers for each of them, and you'll know when you see it. You'll read the description and go, yeah, I got to read this one.
I own the Contract with God trilogy, which is the Contract with God, Dropsy Avenue, and I want to say the Life Force. It was all collected in one volume.
Right.
Which, I mean, and it's one of those, I'm like, I bought it because Contract with God, this is supposed to be the greatest graphic novel ever, and I read it, and I'm like, this is really good, but the other two books that they put in are also as good. I got Last Days in Vietnam, which, if you know anyone that served in Vietnam, it's one of those books that you'll read it and go, should I lend this to whoever? And the answer is, depends on the guy. You know, some guys would probably really like it. Some guys would be like, this is going to take me back to a place I don't want to go back to. I think I have
because that's also an autobiographical one. I mean, Will did spend a certain amount of time in Vietnam because he was doing PS magazine for the Pentagon. So he definitely had his own perspective on Vietnam, which, you know, you couldn't really fault somebody for saying, yeah, you were this privileged guy, you know, flown in by the Pentagon and given the VIP treatment. That's going to give you a very different picture of the war in Vietnam. But he's very, very honest about all of that. Sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
I also have, I think I have Invisible People.
Right.
I have the Will Eisner Reader, which was a bunch of short vignettes, and was one of these they were coming out with a bunch of Eisner stuff, and I was just buying it because that was back in my More Money Than Brains days, where I saw something in previews and went, that one.
Right. Right.
He did an illustrated version of Don Quixote, I want to say The Princess and the Frog, and Moby Dick. And I can't even remember what publisher it was that was doing them, but they, like, all three got solicited around the same time, and I'm like, Eisner, I have to own this, and I bought them, and they're really, really thin graphic novels, but at the same time, it's Moby Dick.
Yes. It's the same as when Bill Sienkiewicz did Moby Dick. It's like, it's thin, and there's only so much of Moby Dick you can get in here, but it's Bill Sienkiewicz, it's Will Eisner. It's like, it's the same when Will Eisner did Hamlet's soliloquy. It's like, okay, it's not really the way I picture Hamlet's soliloquy, but come on, it's Will Eisner. It's how Will Eisner pictured. And there was I think a lot of that came from the kitchen sink spirit, because one of Will's conditions of giving Dennis Kitchen the license to do the Spirit magazine was, okay, I want to do new stuff in it as well. And it's like, I want to do experimental stuff. I want to do things that there's absolutely no reason that you would want to publish this, because it's never going to make a nickel if you tell people what it is. But this is what I'm interested in writing and drawing. So, that's my quid pro quo. And there was enough of it that it did add up. Will was another one of those people that really had to rein himself in from starting 50 different graphic novels. It's like, you have to look at how old you are and go, okay, pick one and finish that one. And when that one's finished, pick another one and finish that one. Yeah, I know you really, really want to do this over here. Anything that you do that isn't going to be part of the Will Eisner move, you're going to have to make that tough call and go,